Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I thought it would be fun to answer some of your questions while I pour paint. It's been a decent while since my last Q&A, and I always like to try and sprinkle these videos in here and there because it's sometimes the only time I get a chance to talk about a certain topic, and it's also nice to be able to answer questions that actual people that watch my videos have. As for what I'm working on, this is the latest wave of palettes that I'm painting the lids on, so the palette towers, some Kuretake specific lids, and also a ton of travel palettes. These will all be available in my store right now, so if you see something you like, the link to my shop will be in the top of the description box. But without further ado, let's get into the questions you guys sent me. These are from a post I made on the community tab here on YouTube as well as Instagram, because I know not everyone can see or check the community tab still, depending on what device you watch YouTube videos on, but anyway. The first question that I figured would be a good way to start this video off: since it's a new year, do you have any specific goals or projects that you've set for yourself to complete in 2021? And the answer to that is yes, definitely, although I think everything that I have project-wise falls under more of the I just ran out of time to do it last year. Like, I always have tons of things that I want to be working on or making and all of that kind of stuff, and at some point it's just like, well, I'm not going to have time to finish it this year, or, you know, it's the holidays, so I guess I'm just going to wait until the new year to start working on this stuff. The first thing that I was hoping to have done more on during the sort of holiday break that I took and then just sort of decided to actually take a break and work on nothing is I actually kind of started a second YouTube channel. It's something that I had been thinking about for quite a few months, and I just, you know, with all the product restocks and just constant, you know, kind of holiday craziness that happens with like Black Friday and just generally restocking and managing my store, I knew I wasn't going to have any time to sort of start it when I had sort of really thought about doing it and committing to it. So I put it off, but yeah, I did, and I sort of announced it and haven't really done anything with it still because I've been working on other things. But yeah, I did, well, I actually sort of rebranded. I did have a second channel, and it was originally for just vlogs, and then I rebranded it for a prop shop channel. So it's called MM's Prop Shop. It is listed under like my other channels tab, but I will link it below. And yeah, the plan for that is I figured, because this is first and foremost very much a visual art, traditional visual art channel, and I just figured with my increasing interest for 3D printing, and also, you know, I am seemingly making a lot more props, or I would like to be making a lot more props and costume type things. I just thought I probably could work on, you know, an entirely separate channel, and I would have enough content to do it, because I realized I was coming up with all of these video ideas that I thought would be interesting, but I didn't really feel like I could post them on this channel, or they were just like pretty niche things, like definitely very 3D print heavy, and not like, I don't mind talking or showing or doing things that are 3D printed. I just, for the most part, and as for the most part right now as it stands on this channel, it seems to be that the 3D printing that I'm doing relates very much to sort of that traditional art aspect. So like, for instance, these lids that I'm painting here are 3D printed lids, and when I'm designing new art supplies, storage products, that is obviously involving 3D printing, but it still connects back to the traditional artwork sense of things that this channel is sort of based on. And there was just all of these other sort of side video ideas that I had that had like nothing to do with that sort of traditional artwork topic of things. So I figured, you know, why don't I look at possibly making this second channel where I can really just have a ton of fun and talk about all the like really nerdy 3D printing machine things that I want to, and, you know, probably it will end up motivating me to maybe make some more props, or just, there's just a lot of things that I think I'm going to be able to do with this channel. So very excited about hopefully starting that up soon. Every time that I sort of try and go to film the first video that I have planned, something else happens. So hopefully that will get filmed soon and there will actually be some content up there. But if you're interested in checking out and sort of subscribing ahead of time, that will be linked down below. But other than that, I actually I think it was sort of like over the Christmassy break sort of thing, I kind of schemed up a bit of a painting series, or I guess it's more illustration series for the plans that I have. That I haven't actually started working on yet, but I really want to make a video about the entire series. Like, it's going to be a very in-depth and long production video, because, you know, I'm going to probably need to do the entire painting series or illustration series for this video, but I thought it might be really interesting to do a video on coming up with like a cohesive painting or illustration series and sort of the process of what that looks like. I can't say that I've really seen anyone really, I'm sure somebody has done that, but since it is such like a long production sort of video, I'm not sure it's done very frequently, and it's just something that I was like very interested in looking at doing. Is finally, you know, I really did not do a lot of traditional artwork last year, which isn't like the worst thing ever, but I really want to look at trying to get in just a bit more traditional artwork, and I figured this painting series might be the perfect opportunity to do. Like, it's very rare that I'm willing to commit to this sort of a time dedication for a series that I'm actually interested in working on as well. So I figured that like golden combination of actually willing and wanting to work on some traditional artwork and also being willing to commit to this multi illustration idea and everything, it was like a sign that I probably should do that thing. So going to be working on a new painting series that you will be seeing in a video at some point. And other than that, I think really the only other project that I have in mind that again is sort of residual from last year is I have some other art supplies products that I want to design and, you know, prototype, see if they work out, see if you guys are interested in them, and all of that kind of fun stuff, which I'm always looking at, you know, the unexpected success that I've had with this art supplies storage. I'm constantly looking at what else could I do, since you guys seem to really be interested in this, and I seem to have found this sort of niche thing of understanding what works for art supply storage, or maybe just being able to create and manufacture myself more unique art supply storage that really works practically for artists, or at least for me and seemingly a lot of you, and looking at what else I could, I guess, improve upon art supplies storage wise. And so yeah, I have a couple of things in mind. There's one thing that I'm hoping to be working on hopefully in the next like month or so. Yeah, so they're sort of my projects imminently that I have planned out. Don't really do goals. There's no point. It's like, oh, I'm going to draw every day. Like, I know I'm never going to be able, never in my life am I going to be drawing every day of the year or some like crazy thing like that. So definitely more project oriented and less goal oriented. But yeah, that is my imminent thought process and plan for what I'm looking at working on. On to the next question. Have you ever been scammed by a company, and if yes, what happened? And unfortunately, I have a really unexciting, but I guess lucky answer to this, because it's no. Although I have, of course, I feel like most people or like YouTubers with public emails do get those like shady sort of emails. So I guess it probably could have been a possibility that I could have been scammed by some company, I guess, sort of offering me this sponsorship opportunity of whatever kind it might have been. But I've never said yes to any of them. So therefore, as far as to my knowledge, at least in that sense, I have never been scammed by anyone. I have gotten a bunch of very interesting emails though. My favorite ones, like I do sort of look at them, like if they make it past my spam folder and actually into my inbox, I will, you know, I can tell that, oh, this is like shady, but I do still sort of look at it to see what level of shady it is. My favorite ones are the ones where it'll be like, oh, we love your beauty YouTube channel. And it's like, well, clearly not. There was one time that it was like, oh, we so enjoy watching your beauty YouTube videos or whatever. And then like farther down into the email, it was like, oh, this offer is only available for US YouTubers or whatever, and it's like, well, you really didn't do your research. So yeah, there's been a lot of emails like that, which again, like I said, I feel like isn't uncommon. Although one more recently, I actually got at least one person, this might have happened a few times, but I've had some people, I guess, sort of impersonate other more popular art YouTubers, or just, they try and essentially like get on a PR list as if I have one, like for the art supplies storage that I make, which I guess I'm very flattered that I've reached this level that people think I sort of have a PR list and I'm sending people free products and stuff, so that's interesting. But yeah, that was a new one where it was like, oh, will you send me your products, which I wouldn't be like opposed to, I suppose, if it wasn't like a scammy person. But yeah, that was more like oh, I've reached this level that I'm like a notable person that has these products that now people are trying to get for free. But yeah, thankfully no scams, nothing like atrocious. I really haven't had anything extensively dramatic happen to me. I feel like the only thing which I have thought about making a video on, and it's an old thing that happened, but I feel like I maybe could, because so much time has passed, and I feel like there could be like a secondary message to it to talk about it at some point. But really, I feel like the most dramatic thing that's ever happened to me, and everyone's gonna be like shocked because I don't think any of you actually know this, but I once had a celebrity steal my artwork and try and sell it on a t-shirt. Which I know half of you were like, that's some hot tea right there, and I'm sure I could have like monetized a story time out of this a long time ago. But yeah, that's about the most dramatic thing that's ever happened. If you want to hear the story, I don't want to go into like too many of the specific details, but I feel like there could be like a message somewhere out of this, that there could be a learning opportunity to be had. But yeah, that's about as dramatic as it ever got, which I mean is pretty dramatic, although it's like years old. It probably happened like 5-6 years ago now, I'm not sure. My ancient brain like has lost all sense of time. But yeah, I wasn't really doing YouTube at the time, and it was a very dramatic and I guess sort of traumatic experience that I feel, well, I'm not sure if it could have gone better. It probably could have gone worse, but wasn't really into like talking about things like that on my channel then. I don't even think I really was doing YouTube, so it's never been brought up until now. So here's the tea right there, and let's move along to the next question. What is your go-to thing to sketch? I really feel like I'm not a big sketcher, but portraits would probably be my go-to. They're just, I really like drawing people. I don't get as much opportunity, I suppose, to make as much like finished art pieces. Like that used to be all I did, was like finished, full-blown like watercolor painting. Like I'm still not a big sketcher, and that's probably why, because I would just sort of forgo the in-between sketching process and just work on these more finished pieces of artwork that took not like a crazy amount of time, but there really just wasn't a point to sketching because I was much more interested in a final piece of art. And less time for that now, so I could see myself sketching different portraits out, because there's a ton of like people, like I'm really into I guess more fan art or just portraits of characters, like fictional characters and people and stuff that I don't necessarily have time or any drive to sort of create a final full-blown painting on, and so that would be like my more sketching sort of thing, which I definitely adhere to. Although if I'm really having a bad art day, those portraits are going to get downgraded into just eyeballs or like a single eyeball. That's always a nice little fun calming activity. If I'm really not feeling the drawing and I'm more into doodling, succulents tend to be my go-to, which is sort of a new thing, but it's a very easy thing and very calming, at least for me, to doodle. It's like pattern, the golden ratio whole thing, like it's just repetitive strokes that you really like. If you got a brush pen going, those strokes really do not need to be precise. You're basically just scribbling, and boy, those flowers and succulent plant life, they're looking great regardless of the fact that they're scribbles, which is always a nice thing to, be feeling like you're not putting in much effort and having it look way fancier than you feel like it should. But yeah, I love me some portraits. On the same vein of sketching is someone asked if I had any plans for a sketchbook flip through. Which, yes, absolutely. If I have a finished sketchbook, I would definitely film a video sort of flipping through it. I have done that. I finished one of my like really old Moleskine watercolor sketchbooks. I don't know if it was last year, but in the last 2 years, I finally finished it, and I did a video on that, which is definitely, that was more like finished artwork, which again is sort of what it tends to be for me. I think I have one that is somewhat close to being finished. I tend to use sketchbooks, at least the ones that are closer to being finished, as sort of just smaller, less significant art pieces that happen to be in a book, I guess you could sort of call them. So the one that's almost done is like a square travelogue book that if I flip through it, you would probably recognize a lot of the artwork from videos, whether it was like testing out, like doing sort of tests or swatches for different paint that I was trying out, or just for some other purpose of a YouTube video. That is where a decent amount of smaller pieces sort of reside in this one particular sketchbook. But yeah, when I finally finish that, whenever that might be, I would definitely do a flip through for it. I don't really have, like, I know some artists have sort of more private sketchbooks that it's work that they're doing for themselves, and they, you know, they have no intention of ever sharing that with anyone, which I guess is sort of nice, because then you don't have to, I guess, worry about what things look like, or you can really test out ideas there and not worry about anyone else seeing them, like however many people you might feel are going to end up having their eyeballs on your work in this book, depending on where you share it. But that, like, I don't have time for a I don't have time for a public sketchbook, forget a private one. Any future sketchbooks that I happen to finally get around to finishing will definitely most likely end up as flip-through videos on this channel. On to the next question. Do you have any recommendations for online art classes? I don't have a ton of experience with online art classes. All I've really done is sort of checked out Skillshare, which is totally not sponsored, although this would have been an A+ opportunity to slip in a sponsorship. But yeah, it is a great service. Like, that's definitely, they obviously have a very, I guess, large online, or I guess sort of influencer marketing, but it's, you know, people say yes to doing sponsorships with them because it is a really fascinating and useful service. And so outside of that, I don't really have much experience, which I personally enjoyed looking at various classes on there when I did have a subscription. I just, honestly, the only reason I don't at the moment, I definitely would look at going back and having one, is I really just did not have time to be, you know, sort of teaching myself more things, which I really should be spending more time on, I guess, sort of looking at learning and, you know, constantly learning things. But I just really, I didn't feel like I had the time to use it. So that was a very long-winded answer. But yeah, outside of that, I really haven't had much experience with online art classes, although I think now there's a decent amount of artists that end up, I guess, sort of creating their own, which if you had some artist that you really liked their work, like whether it was their style, their color schemes, or whatever it might be, I would definitely maybe look at if some of the artists that you follow offer online classes, whether that's like a digital download on their own website or whatever, because I know there's a decent amount out there that now do that, or maybe you follow a particular artist that has a Skillshare class, because I know there's a decent amount of those as well. But that might be a good place to sort of start and look at, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to, I guess, know and I guess find out more about these particular techniques or thought processes of their favorite artists and what those might be. And, you know, what better way to find that out than learning it straight from the source? Someone asked what my favorite material to paint on is. And I feel like the unfortunately boring yet realistic answer to this, seeing as watercolor is my main medium, would be paper, although I'm really not brand or very type loyal. I have a variety of papers and I like them all just as much as the other one, pretty much. I tend to have papers that I like really dislike, and then all of the others are just like, yeah, I'll use that, no problem. There's nothing that is like, I will never use another paper other than this again, at least at the moment. Who knows? I might find that at some point where I refuse to touch any other paper after I found like the one for me. But something that I do really enjoy using as a surface to paint and draw on when the piece calls for it is wood, whether that is a panel, a plaque, wood canvas. I think they're still called wood panels, but more like gallery style wood panels where there's like real thickness to the piece of wood and it's not sort of like a 1/4 inch or 1/16 of an inch board. Yeah, wood, if the piece that you're working on if the wood texture, when I'm using wood, I tend to involve it in the piece, where there's like exposed wood. But yeah, wood, I'm really into the look of the wood grain and exposed wood when it is, you know, when the piece calls for it. It really just depends on what you're working on. I'm not like super wood grain texture crazy. I know Audrey Kawasaki is like one of the best artists that uses that wood grain texture in their pieces, and it's gorgeous stuff. And so, like I said, when the time calls for it, I really love to draw and paint, even in watercolor, on wood. I had a series that I never finished where I used watercolor on wood, which I know sounds insane, but there is this stuff called Watercolor Ground that I think a few companies make now, but when I started to use it, I think Daniel Smith was pretty much the only company that made it. Watercolor Ground is essentially gesso for watercolor, is the best way to describe it. Like, gesso would not take watercolor well, and so Watercolor Ground is sort of the alternative to that. And just like gesso, Watercolor Ground comes in a variety of colors, and one of those is translucent. So you can, you know, watercolor ground up a nice wood panel and still have that wood grain texture underneath, and the watercolor really does work. It's been years since I've used Watercolor Ground on wood, which I probably should like work on that because it is something I really enjoy doing. But I'm sure that you would find the Watercolor Ground doesn't quite react the same to the watercolors as paper. It doesn't sink in as much. It's still very workable and nice looking. But yeah, that's a really cool look to have, especially because watercolor is a translucent medium. You really, depending on what you're painting, will still be able to have that transparency to the color and see the wood grain through. It looks like you're staining the wood, which can be a very interesting and very amazing texture on a piece when the time calls for it. And the final questions that I'm going to answer, I'm going to group all together because they have very much intersecting, I guess, parts between them, and this video is already getting very long, and I'm sure I'm going to have a novel of an answer for this. So I have, how old were you when you started drawing, painting, and sketching? What inspired you to get into art? And who taught you how to draw, or were you self-taught? So I'm sure you can see how all of those questions had a lot to do with each other. So as far as how old I was, I feel like I had a pretty, you know, typical childhood, I guess, artistic upbringing where, you know, kids tend to like draw and sketch and stuff, and it's something that tends to be an activity done in school. I was always into creative things like that, so I was definitely into like, oh, we're gonna do this craft here, and different members of my family are like more into crafting type of things, so it might have been something maybe a little more involved, or I guess promoted outside of school, I guess, a bit, or just it was an activity that was done between, you know, family members and I as well. So, you know, typical, I guess, age when I started drawing, painting, and sketching sort of idea. It wasn't like I was some like a genius baby with a French easel and beret when I was like 30. But as far as considering it more seriously, which is going to sort of answer the other two questions, I was more around like 13, 14, and I'm not actually sure if I've ever told this story. I probably have, because this is somewhat of a relevant topic that I'm sure a lot of people are continuously interested in hearing about, how their various artist YouTubers that they watch have sort of gotten to their point in which they're creating now. But when I was like 14, like, you know, 8th grade, ready to go into high school, the high school that I was planning on going to was sort of like an art-heavy high school. They had specialty art programs, and originally I was, at this point in my life, gung-ho on instrumental music. I played the flute, I was proficient at playing the flute, and I would have quite happily gone on to this school in a more advanced musical program with playing the flute. I can play various other instruments as well, but at that point the flute was like my main jam, and I would like to say I was quite good at it. But this particular high school that I was going to, their instrumental music program, you had to also, if you wanted to do this advanced music program, go into either drama or dance, which absolutely neither of those things ever in a million years was I interested in. And I guess my default, because I was a pretty artistic kid, was the visual art program. Like, I was into the arts, whether that was music or visual art. So pretty much the only reason that I did not do instrumental music and I decided to look more heavily into visual art was because of this high school, which I ended up technically not really going to, because their visual art program you could just do on its own, which was, I don't want to say equally as appealing, because it really wasn't, because as soon as I sort of thought about wanting or decided that, well, I guess I'm not doing instrumental music, I'm gonna have to do visual art, then I started getting like more serious about it and thinking like, oh, you better step up your game, kid, because you want to do possibly better than you might be doing currently. And so that was more the push of looking at things more seriously in a visual art sense. I was always like definitely into visual art and decently good at it, but it was not my main focus until that point. And this was a program that you had to audition for, no matter, like, regardless of what program you were going into, you had to audition for. I did make it into the advanced visual art program, whatever they might have called it. And like I mentioned, I didn't actually end up, well, technically I did. I lasted like a week, I think, before I got really sick. If you don't know, I'm type 1 diabetic, and there was just a lot of things happening at that point where my blood sugar and body was just not liking me, and it was quite literally killing me constantly. So I did not attend much school at that time. And because I was unfortunately continuously missing school because of this, uncontrollable illness, unfortunately, you don't just like become less diabetic the next day. The school decided to strip me of that visual art program. I hadn't actually even really started the first semester that I was there at the beginning. They'd moved all of my advanced artwork to the second part of the year. So I wasn't actually physically in the art program yet. I was doing the other courses, and then the next term it was going to be like a gung-ho art craziness. But yeah, they really just apparently decided they did not want to deal with someone with a chronic illness, and they, honestly, the best way to put it, they wanted to get rid of me. And I guess they figured the best way to do that would be to strip me of being in this advanced art program, because I would essentially have no reason to stay at this school once I possibly managed to get my health back under control to a point where I could attend school in a safe fashion. And yeah, so there endeth my art education, and I've been doing my thing since then. So I'm not mad about it at all, honestly. I would not have gotten to doing half of the things that have gotten me to this point without sort of being kicked out of there. I'm more annoyed at the fact that they wouldn't put up with someone with a chronic illness, I guess. It's just ridiculous, and it hopefully would not be something that would happen today, although I feel like it probably still would. But I'm not mad about the fact that I didn't do it, because I got to do all of these much more exciting and beneficial things because I was not stuck there in that program. And that's why I figured that sort of answered the other two questions, because there really wasn't anything in particular that inspired me to get into artwork. It was more, I was always sort of very creative, and I was into visual artwork, and that was my option, and I sort of doubled down on that option. And as far as education, the last art class that I had of any sort other than looking at, various YouTube tutorials and a few different online classes of that nature was an 8th grade typical nothing fancy art class. So I guess you could say technically self-taught, although I know a lot of people do not like that term, because even if you are not in a school setting, you tend to still be learning from other artists in whatever form that might be. But I do not have any advanced art education from like some, you know, fancy art college or whatever. It's just been me observing on my own time from other artists and figuring out myself what I like and don't like and how certain things work. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna end this Q&A, by having a really depressing story about how I got kicked out of school for having a chronic illness. No, but really thank you guys as always for submitting your questions. You always come up with really interesting ones of topics and various other things that I would never think to, I guess, talk about or have another opportunity to maybe talk about or discuss. So I very much appreciate your time for coming up with the questions for me that you would like me to answer. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, all of these products are available now, so a link will be in the description box with anything else I might have mentioned throughout this video. But yeah, that is everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.